Hey y'all, we are back to continue our discussion on garden planning. Now, if you've missed any of the videos, I have created a playlist for you so you can go back and check them out. Now, yesterday we talked about till or not to till. Do we put the garden in the ground or do we do raised beds? And I'm really curious what your plans are. Are you going to go ahead and put the garden in the ground or are you going to put them in raised beds? And for the sake of my back, I let you guys know that I am going to be planting in raised beds. Now, keeping with the theme of keeping everything simple and not breaking your body over this first season, I'm only going to be building my beds to 18 inches. However, I plan on building the beds where I'll easily be able to add on to it up to 24 inches for next spring. And 18 inches is still pretty low to the ground, so we'll see how my back handles it this year. Now, if you're like me and you have a bad back or you just can't get that low to the ground anymore, you can build your raised beds as tall as you want. That's the beauty of it all. Now, let's say you plan on building a 3 foot tall raised bed. That's a lot of soil to put in to that raised bed. And if you're building a raised bed that tall, I highly suggest taking an adaptation of a hugelkultur garden. And that is where they actually make a mound. They make a mound with tree branches or logs at the bottom, and then the tree branches get smaller and smaller, and they just keep making this mound. And when you get to the top, maybe they add leaves. It's basically yard debris. And then on top of that, they put in their nice garden mix, and that's where they would plant their plants. Now, in a raised bed situation, you're not going to be making a mound, although I guess you could, but you would just take and stack in your logs in the bottom, about halfway, and then put your soil on top of that. And what that's going to do is while your plants are growing, all that stuff underneath is going to be breaking down, mulching down, and feeding your plants and feeding the microbials in the soil. And that's what we want. We want our soil teeming with microbials. That's going to improve the nutrition value of the food that you're growing. And now this is a method that I've actually used, and it actually works really well. I had a 150-gallon grow bucket and some wood around the property. I put the freshest wood on the bottom, and then as I went up, that's where all the rotten stuff went. And then I added my soil on top of that, and it was great success. Everything I grew in there did really, really well. Now, since my raised beds are only going to be 18 inches tall this season, there's really no reason for me to add, anything in there. So basically, what I'm going to be doing is filling up my beds about 12 inches high with a really good garden mix, maybe some cow manure, something to help the microbials build up in there. And then on top of that, I'm going to put in 6 inches of mulch or wood chips. And that brings us to the deep mulch method, a method of gardening that I absolutely love. With the deep mulch method, there is no tilling. There is no tilling. We're not disturbing the soil. We're not disturbing the microbials. We're not disturbing the earthworms. We're not disturbing a thing except for where we're putting our seeds. And my favorite form of mulch is hay, just regular old hay. And before you say anything, yes, I am fully aware that hay has seeds. It's full of seeds. Now, if that hay is too thin, yes, it will germinate because it's the same concept as when you turn the soil when you're tilling. All of those seeds, those little seeds from the native grasses that have been dormant, now they have everything they need, water and sunlight, to germinate. All of the food you're giving your plants, they're absorbing as well. Now, here's the big disclaimer on hay: herbicides. Everything that I'm able to get in my area seems to all have been sprayed with herbicides. And I learned a very, very, very valuable lesson when I lost 75% of my garden. I put the hay down 8 inches thick. Everything was perfect. The plants were thriving. We got a really good rain. And I smelled a chemical smell coming from my garden. I mean, it was just chemical. It was very hard to describe. It should not have been coming from my garden at all. But I smelled this chemical smell, and the next day, all of my plants were wilted down, yellow, and they just didn't make a comeback after that. Now, after some research, I did discover that when hay is sprayed with herbicides, that herbicide actually lives in the cells of that plant long after it's been dried out. And then once it gets wet, it's able to leach back in to the soil I worked so hard to create. And because I don't believe that I can get hay in my area that hasn't been sprayed with herbicide, I won't be using it. It's a very inexpensive mulch. It works fabulous, but I can't risk, especially with a small garden, I can't risk losing my garden because the hay was sprayed with herbicides. So I'm still going to utilize the deep mulch method, but this time I'm going to be using broken down wood chips or mulch. I don't want to use wood chips that haven't been broken down yet in this garden because as the wood chips break down, ironically enough, they leach the nitrogen out of the soil. Valuable nitrogen that my plants need. So even in the raised beds, I'm still going to be utilizing a deep mulch method, but this year I'm only going to be applying broken down wood chips or mulch. And I want to make sure that whatever mulch I use does not have any dyes or anything like that in it. Now, I'll be utilizing a deep mulch method for my garden. There's several reasons why. The main one is that we have very hot summers here, especially in raised beds as the sun is beating down on everything. That moisture that you put into the soil just gets sucked right out of the soil with the hot afternoon sun, causing unwanted stress on my plants. And a stressed out plant's not going to give you much food. Now, by utilizing deep mulch, what we're doing is we're actually keeping that soil cool. So we're putting this layer between the hot sun and the soil. We're putting this layer and it just blocks out all the heat that's coming down, beating down. The other thing that it's going to do is it's going to help retain moisture, which if you have ever grown plants in pots on your porch or something, you know that you have to water them daily because that moisture just gets leached right out. It just goes bye-bye really quick. Now, I've done videos in the past where I showed the surface heat and then I showed the temperature once you remove the hay, and it was a significant difference. By keeping the roots cool and moist, you're going to extend the life of your plant through the summer months when everybody else around you is already done because their plants can't take the heat. And it's not the actual plant, it's the actual roots that are having a really hard time struggling in the heat of the summer. And that's absolutely the reason why I love the deep mulch method of gardening.